If you haven't heard by now, federal workers are being fired by the thousands. It's estimated that around 200,000 federal employees have now been fired across all agencies. But of course, on this channel, we are going to be focusing on the Department of the Interior, otherwise known as our park rangers. Hello everyone, it's Emma and welcome back to my channel where I talk about all sorts of things zero waste, focusing on free, easy, and fun ways to live low waste. If I talk a little bit too fast for you, there's a gear icon right down here where you can change the speed of the video. And while I do definitely like to keep it a little bit more light and hopeful on this channel, I do also want to acknowledge reality. Our public lands are always under threat, shrinking, of oil drilling, of forest fires, of climate change. You get the idea. And I predicted this in January, right as Trump took office, that I knew this would be a bad term for public lands, but I did not estimate it that it would be this bad. So let's get into it. Let's talk about who's being fired, why it's impacting the earth and climate change, and what we can do about it. But first, a few things right off the bat. Yes, I believe in land back, but I don't think that sitting here idly by and just letting the Trump administration take our public lands, I don't think that this is a good thing for anybody, but particularly for the land back movement. Trump is not going to give land back, so that is why I want to push back against this and fight for our public lands. So yes, that is just something to keep in mind. I believe in land back, but Trump does not. So that is why I'm speaking about this now. And it is also important to acknowledge that the land is more than just a resource. I often use that language and I shouldn't. And I have gotten several DMs over this week on Instagram being like, we need to protect the resource. We need to protect the resource. Like, yeah, we do. We do need to protect, the lumber. We do need to protect the clean water, but we also need to protect endangered species. We need to worry about the whole ecosystem because the ecosystem affects us as well. The land is more than just a resource. We're part of the ecosystem and a healthy ecosystem is good for us. Now let's get into it. What is even happening? So federal workers are being fired in droves. This has been talked about for weeks. Literally as soon as Inauguration Day happened. Just for context, my husband Dan works for the Bureau of Land Management. He is a park ranger. So we've been getting the scoop like behind the scenes for the last month or so before it hit like the public. So pretty on in the Trump administration 2.0, we knew that Dan's job was under threat because they were talking about firing probationary employees. But it was just kind of hearsay about a month ago. It's simply just people in their probationary period. It typically happens whenever you sign into a new position. So while it might be the case for Dan that he's just a new federal employee period, that puts him in a probationary spot, but also anybody who's signed into a new position. I knew somebody from a park that I volunteered at last summer that has been working for the National Park Service for years, if not decades. But because they signed on to a new position, they were in a probationary period and they got fired. Even though they had dedicated their entire career to the National Park Service, they were fired. So it's not just new park rangers, it is anybody who's in a new position in that probationary period, which lasts 1 or 2 years. So that is a lot of federal employees. Again, this is across the board. So the Office of Personnel Management, or OPM, and DOJ, which we'll get to them in a moment, they're the ones conducting the firing. They're the ones saying, yep, these people need to be fired, these people need to be fired. And they're pretty much leaving these agencies with no choice. So the first round of firings that happened about a week ago as I'm filming this, they told the agencies, fire whoever you can. And so the agencies could fight as hard as they possibly could for their employees, which they did. Dan was spared during this first round of firings because he's a veteran. Somehow DEI saved Dan. If you didn't know, veterans count as DEI hires. Basically anybody who was hired as DEI, so disabled people, veterans, etc., were able to keep their jobs in this first round of firing because the agencies found these loopholes and they fought for their people. These agencies don't want to lose their people. But a second round is dropping basically as I'm talking to the camera today or tomorrow as I'm filming this. And that list basically said, yeah, sorry, we don't care about veterans anymore. Veterans are going to get fired this week. All these agencies are finding these loopholes, and then OPM and DOJ is pulling the strings. DOJ is doing all of the pulling of the strings, and they're telling OPM, the Office of Personnel Management, to do this because that's legal. It's legal for OPM to tell these agencies to fire people. It is not legal for DOJ to do so. But again, DOJ is still pulling the strings for OPM, which is why this is making this very illegal and suspicious. So once these agencies find out these loopholes, OPM via DOJ is saying, no more loopholes, everybody's getting fired. Now, let's bring it back to DOJ, shall we? What even is DOJ? Why are they pulling the strings? And what makes these firings so wrong? DOJ, otherwise known as the Department of Government Efficiency, is not a real department. It is officially the U.S. DOGE, or DOJ, Service Temporary Organization. It is an initiative of the second Trump administration led by Elon Musk. Despite its name, DOJ is not a cabinet-level department, but rather a temporary contracted organization under the United States DOJ Service, formerly known as the United States Digital Service, or USDS. Its purpose is to carry out Trump's agenda on federal spending cuts and deregulation, and according to the order that established it, to modernize federal technology and software to maximize government efficiency and productivity. DOJ is not an actual department, therefore they really don't have the authority to be doing any of this. It is not a Congress-appointed position. Elon Musk was not actually appointed, as was the rest of the cabinet members. To quote Hamilton, follow the money and see where it goes. Follow the money. It's literally Elon Musk pulling all these strings to get government contracts. It has since been rescinded, but about a week ago, there was a government contract for the government to buy Cybertrucks. He's also gotten contracts with his space company, SpaceX, and so many more, right? He's firing literal low-level government employees, but he's getting government contracts at the same time. So if that already isn't suspicious enough, here's what is actually happening when people are getting fired that makes this so unjust. By the way, all of these resources will be tagged down below if you would like to do some more reading on your own. This is a letter from the ACLU, or the American Civil Liberties Union, and so they drafted a letter to Congress, and they might also be suing. What they cite here is that under 5 CFR 315.083A, but it basically states that probationary employees can be terminated legally if the employee fails to demonstrate fully their qualifications for continued employment. Basically, how all these people are getting fired legally is OPM is saying, oh, all of these employees, yeah, they just don't meet expectations. They are not fulfilling their duties. Plenty of these employees, again, not 100%, not 100% of employees of any organization is ever going to be perfect, but plenty of these employees have record of their performance reports saying that they exceed expectations or meet expectations. Plenty of people who have been fired have never had a poor performance report ever, but they're being fired for poor performance because it's illegal to be fired for poor performance. So that's just what OPM is saying. That's what Doge is saying. Oh, all these employees, yeah, they're just performing poorly, even though there's no record of that. So here's where it can come in. If you have been fired by the federal government in the last few weeks, no matter what agency you work for, if you've been fired for quote unquote poor performance, fight that. If you're in your union, let them help you. Even if nothing comes out of it and you still do not have a job, it is still so important to fight back and not just sit idly by and let them push us around. Here's the other thing that really grinds my gears about, especially everything that I've seen in the news and from like MAGA people, is saying that, oh, they're just getting rid of all the bureaucrats. They're getting rid of all the bureaucrats in the government, blah, 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 blah. That would be great if they actually were. But it's so silly to me for you to call especially park rangers bureaucrats. A bureaucrat, from Oxford Languages, an official in a government department, in particular one perceived as being concerned with procedural correctness at the expense of people's needs. So where the officials of the bureaucracy make the decisions instead of elected officials. That sounds like Elon Musk. He was not elected and he's making all of these decisions. But oh no, our park rangers, they're the part of the bureaucracy. Get them out of here. The bureaucracy is a system of government in which most of the important decisions are made by state officials rather than elected representatives. So I can see where people are drawing those conclusions, but people like park rangers, they're not making decisions for the entire country. Something else to note here with park rangers too is they are probably the lowest paid federal employees in the entire government. They work long hours, they work in really remote positions, really remote areas of the country, especially seasonal. Seasonal park rangers get so taken advantage of, but do you know why they do it? Because they're passionate about it. They love it. They're dedicated to the land. They're dedicated to the material. They are dedicated to giving tours and serving the public. They are dedicated to being public servants. They are not bureaucrats, especially because, some of these people that I have mentioned that I know personally who have been fired unjustly. I mean, even us, Dan and I moved here for this job. Dan got this job, his first permanent position, working for the federal government as a park ranger. We moved across the country to a town that we have never been in before. We knew nobody here. We had to drop everything and move here for this job. And that happens to other people. And at least we live in a town. Plenty of people who have also moved to these places have children that had to switch schools, and plenty of these people move to remote areas where you don't have a grocery store. So as you can see, it affects far more than just the park rangers. Obviously, we're also talking about, the Federal Aviation Administration, people are being fired, the IRS, people are being fired, the Department of the Veterans Affairs, the VA, they're being fired. People across the entire government are being fired. But again, focusing on this topic in particular with park rangers in regards to climate change, which if you haven't checked it out already, check out this video next talking about why public lands are so key to fighting climate change. That will make more sense why I'm talking about park rangers in this video. These people who are fired and living in these areas are going to have to sell their homes, they're going to have to move, they're going to have to move their children, they're going to have to find new jobs. And these park rangers too, what jobs are they going to find? Nobody's hiring. The federal government is also doing a hiring freeze. So the government is firing everybody and hiring nobody. So these park rangers are not going to be able to find more federal work. They might be able to find state work. They might be able to work for nonprofits or friends organizations. Thousands of people are going to be trying to do the same thing. So yeah, a couple tens or hundreds of these park rangers are going to be able to find jobs in other fields, but not all of them. So what are they going to do for work? And not only does it affect the ranger and their family and their direct community, it's going to affect every single one of us as well. As I already stated, and as I mentioned in that video about public lands, our public lands are always at constant at risk of climate change, of different administrations, because the Democratic Party does not care about public lands either. They care like slightly more. They didn't do anything nearly quite this bad, but they could have done far, far more to protect our public lands and give land back. Anyway, so now our public lands are at even more of a risk. And what does this mean? This means that plenty of people who have been fired. The Forest Service got hit particularly hard this firing cycle, and they also haven't hired anybody in like the last 6 months, so the Forest Service is at a really, really bad spot right now. And the Forest Service is responsible for a lot of our forest management, meaning prescribed burns, getting rid of fuels, and things of that nature to prevent forest fires. Plenty of our federal workers also work on dams with the Bureau of Reclamation, meaning clean water, hydroelectricity for customers, especially out here in the West. For agriculture, this is going to impact agriculture as well, meaning your food and how much you pay for food, because now there's not enough workers on the dams. Not to mention, Trump also released a whole bunch of water in Central California his first week in office to help the forest fires in LA, even though the river does not actually flow there. The crops in California and in the desert Southwest are going to be at a risk this year. As I already said, Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, employees are being fired. As if it wasn't already scary enough to be flying, there's been 3 plane crashes this year. Bringing it back to public lands, what does this mean for you? If you had a vacation plan this year to go to a national park, it's going to be affected. Few examples off the top of my head. Yosemite has already canceled all camping in Yosemite National Park after June. So that's like a month and a half of the season you'll be able to camp in the park, and it's already booked. So you're not even going to be able to get a camping spot. This means that plenty of your ranger-led programs are going to be canceled. Boat tours in Voyageurs National Parks, ranger hikes, campground talks, all of that is going to be canceled because those are almost always led by seasonal rangers, and there are no seasonal rangers now at any of these parks. Not a single seasonal ranger has been hired at any national park. To be clear, when I'm talking about public lands, I am also talking about the Forest Service, the BLM, the Fish and Wildlife, etc. This means that there's probably going to be more trash on the trails. Please don't litter, ever, but especially now. This means that your bathrooms probably aren't going to be as clean. That means your visitor centers probably won't be open. And if they are open, they probably won't have any rangers for you to talk to. They might not have any brochures stocked. Back up at the gates, this might mean even park closures. There have already been some closures of trails in Washington State. This is word of mouth from people that I know that belong to the Forest Service. And the Forest Service employees have been fired, so the roads can't be maintained. Gates can't be unlocked because there's nobody to go unlock the gates. Roads cannot be plowed because there's nobody to operate the snow plows. I hope that you get the idea that this is going to affect every single person. So what can we do about this? Is there anything that you and I can do as an everyday person to fight this? First, keep using your public lands. Keep going. We need to show that there is a demand for them. Will it help? Again, will any of these action steps actually help? It's hard to say, but I personally would rather do something than do nothing at all. So if you want to, join this small little fight with me and feel like you're doing something, so continue to go to your public lands. Especially public lands, like, again, I'm gonna use Voyageurs for an example just because I volunteered there. The boat tours at Voyageurs National Park paid for the seasonal employees. It was a different budget from what they actually get from the Department of the Interior, the DOI, from the government. It was the specific tours that funded the seasonal rangers. So tours and programs like that at your public lands might be the only way that that park is making money. And when you go, please be respectful. It is important to be a respectful visitor all year long, no matter how many staff are there, but especially this year where staff is going to be extremely limited. It is so important to be a respectful visitor. Don't go into the park thinking that you own the place and you're going to yell at everybody and be rude and be mean because there's no resources available. It's not their fault. It is not some random small little ranger at the bottom of the pyramid. It's not their fault. Know where the blame is, point the blame in that direction, blame them, hold them accountable, and not the little guys at the bottom who are also fighting these same things as you, but they're just wearing a park ranger uniform. Please don't litter. Again, that should really go without saying. Please do not litter. Ever, but especially now. If you see litter, please pick it up. Carry a trash bag with you, carry some gloves with you, carry a trash grabber with you. Help out the rangers just a little bit. Picking up a piece of litter every now and then will help these rangers out. That if you see your public lands being a little bit neglected, it's because they're understaffed. See what you can do to help. We should not feel obligated to do this in order to keep our parks open. This is not to backfill these positions. This is not to say, yep, government, we love what you're doing. We're just gonna take care of it ourselves. No, that's not what we're doing here. We're just trying to lessen the burden on the few park rangers that's left. Secondly, volunteer. Again, don't volunteer in a position that is filling a ranger spot. That is not okay. But volunteer in a way that's already been an available volunteer position. Again, that might just look like you picking up trash. That might look like you just walking the trail and educating people about Leave No Trace, for example. That might look like you sitting at the visitor center and handing out brochures so that way the rangers can go do their ranger duties. Things like that. All your parks, go onto their website, see if there's any volunteer options available for you. If you don't have the time to volunteer, you can also give your money to the parks. So most national parks won't allow you to give them money directly. Like you can't give, I'm gonna keep using Voyagers, you can't give Voyagers National Park money, but you can give the Voyagers Conservancy money because that is not a federal agency. It is a nonprofit. It is the park's friends organization. So when you hear people say give money to the friends organization, that's what they're talking about. Like Friends of Yosemite, Friends of Yellowstone. They're all gonna have different names. But honestly, if you just Google Friends of National Park, you'll probably find a conservancy, a nonprofit that you can give money to if you're unable to give time to these organizations. You can also just keep speaking up about it, keep making noise, keep talking about how unjust it is, keep talking about the illegality of it. And most importantly, call and write your elected officials. But how? I actually have a template down below that you can copy and paste to your representatives. Down below, you can also find links on how to find your congressmen, how to find your senators, and also these 4 guys that the ACLU wrote to. They are part of the Senate on Homeland Security and the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability. Those 4 people will also be linked in the template down below. All this information will be in the Google Docs down below. So you can use this template to write to your elected officials, and you can use this template to call them. Or you can also get the 5 Calls app. It's great if you do both, but like if you prefer to call, make that your mission to call as often as possible. If you prefer to email, make that your mission to email as much as possible. Follow up with the people that you email. If you, I got an email back from my senator actually this morning, and he was like, oh yeah, like I do not agree with anything that Trump is doing, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, okay, cool. What are you doing about it though? Fine and dandy that you do not agree with what's happening, but what are you doing? You have power, Senator guy. Do something about it. I don't even know his name. I just moved here. Give me some slack. So keep making noise publicly, right? Share stuff to Facebook, share stuff to Instagram, to TikTok, to Twitter, to Blue Sky, wherever you're on social media. Share stuff, amplify these people, amplify these stories of these rangers who were unjustly fired. Keep speaking up, and then also keep making noise to the people who can make a bigger action, right? Like I can sit here all day long advocating on Instagram, but what's really gonna make change is my senators actually taking action because they have power. They have governmental power to do something about it, and they should. And so I'm gonna keep bothering them like, hey, I haven't heard from you. You better write me back. You better do something about this. It's about to be too late. Do something now. Like keep bothering them. They work for you. They work for us. We are paying, they're also federal workers that we are paying with our tax dollars. And many of them we elected ourselves. They work for us. They're public servants just as much as our park rangers. Let's put them to work. And once again, if you are a federal employee who has been fired, please keep speaking up as well, and please fight back. If you were fired for poor performance, but you have never had a poor performance report ever, please fight back. Once again, another video that's a little bit doomy, a little bit gloomy, but important to make because not only is it unjust to the people who have been fired, these rangers who are dedicated, who are passionate, who are not paid a very good wage, are being fired for no reason. Truly, it is no reason, but it's also unfair to us. We are paying tax dollars for these people to be employed, to work for us, to provide us with these resources. We are paying with our tax dollars to have these federal lands implemented. We deserve to have a place to go recreate. We deserve clean water. We deserve clean air because again, this affects more than just our public lands. This affects our rivers. This affects, our power plants and other things of that are operated by the government. Ooh, one last thing. He deserves his own video. Maybe I'll make that soon if there's interest. The Department of the Interior, Doug Burgum, formerly the governor of North Dakota. He got his money. He got rich based off of oil and gas. And that's precisely what he intends to do with our public lands. He is now in charge with the public lands. He wants to shrink them for oil and gas usage, which is going to be easier now that there's less people working for the federal government, right? So one issue at a time. I can make a full video on Doug Burgum and what this means as we move forward. But for now, let's see if we can get our federal employees back. Let's see if we can protect our public lands. And of course, as I said in the beginning, the goal is to have co-management of these areas or full management of these areas by Indigenous peoples in the future. We need to keep the resource that we have right now, and then hopefully later down the line can work towards co-management options. We can work towards full management by Indigenous peoples of these lands because they are the original stewards of these lands. Anyway, I think that brings us to the end. Thank you so much for watching, especially because, again, these topics are heavy, they are sad, they are heartbreaking, they can be scary. And it is totally okay to feel those emotions. When they're doing illegal things and nobody's stopping them, that's scary, right? Like, it's okay to be scared. It is okay to be worried. But like the title of one of my favorite books, Let This Radicalize You, take that fear and let it move you to do something, even if it's something as simple as downloading the 5 Calls app and giving a call to your senator. Even if something as simple as using the template down below, copy and paste it into your email and sending that to your congressman. Taking a few minutes out of your day to do something with that anger, with that fear, rather than just sit here idly by. Again, like, I don't know if I'm gonna make a difference with my one email, but I would rather try. What if it does? So what if I take 5 minutes out of my day to send an email and it does nothing? But what if I take 5 minutes out of my day to send an email and it does something? That is why I do the small things that I do. It seems small, it seems meaningless, but what if that one small thing is the thing that makes a difference? So hopefully that leaves you with some hope. So I thank you again for watching, especially because social media does not love political content, but I am moving more towards talking about politics because it is important. It is all connected. I have a full video talking about intersectionality coming soon, about why I talk about politics as an environmentalist, because it's all connected. For now though, you can read The Intersectional Environmentalist, which we read for my Eco Book Club in January, which you can join below. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for supporting all of my work, but especially my political content. I will see you in the next video, but until then, remember that your small actions make a big difference in the long run. Bye guys. This lighting, I thought it was gonna be good. Because it's legal to be fired for oh my gosh, that's a difficult sentence.